The day is September 28th, 1781. George Washington and other French generals have successfully commanded a force of 17,000 French and Continental troops to Yorktown, where they have surrounded General Lord Charles Cornwallis. This is the final campaign of the American Revolution. We are at the end of our tether, and now, or never, our deliverance must come. George Washington, April 9th, 1781. Shortly after that, in June of the same year, Washington received word that a French fleet of 28 vessels was headed from Newport to the Chesapeake Bay. In 1780, General Lord Cornwallis received order from his superior officer, General Sir Henry Clinton, to build a deep defensible port in the Chesapeake Bay. Cornwallis notoriously landed on Yorktown as his choice for this location, although he was very skeptical himself of this decision due to its location on a peninsula. Washington had recently been discussing plans of attacking New York with French Admiral Jean-Baptiste Rochambeau and his army of 5,500 French men. However, after the change in circumstance and the imminent arrival of the French fleet, Washington changed his views on the follow-up for the American campaign. He is quoted as saying in his diary, "Matters having now come to a crisis and a decisive plan to be determined on, I was obliged to give up all idea of attacking New York, and instead thereof to remove the French troops and a detachment from the American army to the head of Elk to be transported to Virginia for the purpose of cooperating with the force from the West Indies against the troops in that state." On June 18th, 1781, Rochambeau and his French army left Newport, Rhode Island, for White Plains, New York, to regroup with General Washington and his army, and to discuss strategy for the march south. The two armies devised a plan for the march in which they could easily avoid British troops. They marched through New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. Washington and Rochambeau were the first two to arrive in the Chesapeake Bay. They arrived on September 18th, 1781, and followed shortly after were the troops, artillery, and supplies. 4 days prior to his arrival at Yorktown, Washington met with French commander Marquis de Lafayette at Williamsburg, where it is said that no man ever greeted his mistress with more joy than Lafayette and Washington did greet each other. A victory at the Battle of Chesapeake Bay was a prerequisite to the successful siege of Yorktown. Following an unsuccessful campaign in the Carolinas, General Lord Charles Cornwallis decided to march his army up north towards Yorktown and the East Coast in hopes of either gaining reinforcements from Sir Henry Clinton or an evacuation. On September 5th, the long-awaited French fleet, led by Comte de Grasse, finally arrived in the Chesapeake Bay. It unloaded 1,800 sailors and 90 officers when it discovered an array of ships on the horizon. They were originally believed to be Allied vessels from Rhode Island. However, as the numbers of the vessels increased into the 20s, they were reassured that they were British. Comte de Grasse decided to engage the naval fleet in order to allow the fleet from Rhode Island to make its way down south. The significance of this was that that fleet of vessels from Rhode Island was the final piece of the sea blockade blocking Cornwallis from escaping Yorktown. As far as firepower and overall number of vessels, de Grasse had the advantage, but he was short 1,800 men and 90 officers. After roughly 6 hours of sea warfare, de Comte had only had 2 of his ships damaged, while nearly 6 of the British ships were unsailable. This caused the British to retreat and give the Chesapeake to the Continental and French forces. Within a couple of weeks after the Battle of the Chesapeake, Washington, Rochambeau, and de Lafayette were all stationed and ready for the siege of Yorktown to take place. The siege of Yorktown occurred from September 28, 1781 to October 19, 1781. On October 3, 1781, Allied forces in Gloucester defeated Tarleton, forcing the British back behind their lines. Now this cut off their supplies for fresh food and fodder for horses, which meant that Cornwallis had to order many of the horses to be killed to prevent starving them to death. It was 3 days after this, on October 6th, that the Allies began digging their first siege line. The line went up in one night due to several days of rain that softened the ground, making digging quick and easy. Another 3 days after this, on October 9th, the artillery batteries are completed for the Allies. The French opened fire at 3 p.m., and Washington fired the first American cannon around 5 p.m. On October 14th, the Allies captured redoubts 9 and 10, allowing them to complete the second siege line and further advance the artillery. Another 3 days after this, on October 17th, after suffering heavy casualties and heavy morale loss, an officer with a white flag of truce appeared to try to negotiate surrender terms with the Allies. No terms are met on this deal, and the Allies continue to bombard the British with constant cannon fire until they surrender 2 days later. The overall number of the Allied forces numbered 18,900, and they suffered 88 dead soldiers and 301 wounded soldiers. The British, however, suffered between 142 and 309 losses, had 326 to 595 wounded, and had an estimated 7,416 to 7,685 The American Revolution was the result of an entire nation taking a stand against oppression. It was the result of sacrifice and dedication of citizens from around this country and resulted in our independence.